Hey, welcome, New Day. Welcome to online worship. We're excited that we're able to worship together, even though we can't all be together in the same place. We know that Jesus is our comforter and our healer, and he takes away all shame. So let's sing and praise the Lord together, because today is a glorious day.
And I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. And I was breathing but not alive. And all my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new. Jesus, when I met you, you called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan, now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing, now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you called my name, I ran out that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness to your glorious day. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. In all my days, I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake
No matter what our circumstances look like, no matter what the condition of the world around us, we still declare that you are good. It's actually the hope that we cling to, that you are good, God, that you see us in every condition, that you know where we're at from the moment that we wake up till we lay our head down, God, that we can proclaim your goodness, that you love us, God, that you lead us, that you take us through the darkest nights, the darkest of times, and we come out, God, still declaring your goodness because of your great love for us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Hi, everyone. First off, thank you so much for sharing your prayer requests with us this past week. We are really grateful just to have the opportunity to approach the throne of God with confidence in who he is, just laying everything before him and listening to him and enjoying his presence. So thank you. One of the common threads I think we are all hearing a lot about right now is just related to isolation and what it's like to be away from community. While each of us are kind of trying to figure out how to connect, I know one simple thing that can mean a lot is just sending a note to someone and sharing with them what they mean to you. I've heard some of our kids are sending encouraging little notes to each other, and I love the example that they are setting for us adults. So if you haven't received it already, you'll be receiving a little card in the mail from New Day. And with that, we would just encourage you to flip through the New Day directory and send a note to someone, just sharing what they mean to you. I know as I flip through that directory, I'm just reminded of what an incredible group of people God has brought together at New Day. So also this next Wednesday, we have a fun opportunity for our kids to get to connect. At the end of every Kids Zone Plus year, we have an awards night just to celebrate all that the kids have learned over the past year. And while we can't be together in person this year, we are still going to have an awards night, just in a drive-through format. So we're excited to see the kids, share some encouragement with them, and just celebrate what God has done this year. So the details of that are in the weekly email, and I'll also be sending out a note to all the families in Kids Zone with some more details in the next couple days. And finally, our weekly Bible studies, Monday night Bible study, men's Bible study, and women's Bible study are also continuing. And if you haven't joined one of these groups in the past, I would definitely encourage you to join one now, especially in this time where we can't be together in person. It's a great way to connect and study the Word of God together. So thank you.
When Jesus went in the boat back to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him there. A leader of the synagogue named Jairus came there, saw Jesus, and fell at his feet.
He begged Jesus, saying again and again, "My daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her, so she will be healed and will live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed Jesus and pushed very close around him.
Among them was a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered very much from many doctors and had spent all the money she had. But instead of improving, she was getting worse. When the woman heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his coat. She thought, "If I can just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Instantly, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed from her disease.
At once, Jesus felt power go out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" His followers said, "Look at how many people are pushing against you, and you ask, 'Who touched me?'"
But Jesus continued, looking around to see who had touched him. The woman, knowing that she was healed, came and fell at Jesus' feet. Shaking with fear, she told him the whole truth. Jesus said to her, "Dear woman, you are made well because you believed. Go in peace, be healed of your disease."
While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of the synagogue leader. They said, "Your daughter is dead. There is no need to bother the teacher anymore." But Jesus paid no attention to what they had said. He told the synagogue leader, "Don't be afraid, just believe."
Jesus let only Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, go with him. When they came to the house of the synagogue leader, Jesus found many people there making lots of noise and crying loudly. Jesus entered the house and said to them, "Why are you crying and making so much noise? The child's not dead, only asleep."
But they laughed at him. So after throwing them out of the house, Jesus took the child's father and mother and his 3 followers into the room where the child was. Taking hold of the girl's hand, he said to her, "Talitha kum." This means, "Young girl, I tell you to stand up." At once the girl stood up and began walking. She was 12 years old.
Everyone was completely amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell people about this. Then he told them to give the girl something to eat.
Hello friends, glad that we could be together again this morning. I hope you're as excited as I am about entering into the text today in Mark chapter 5. Behind me is the American Red Cross here in Rochester. It was founded in 1881 by Clara Barton, who during the Civil War saw the needs of the soldiers on the battlefield and said, "We need to do something to help them." In the midst of that, she gathered people together and founded the whole Red Cross movement. The idea is to serve those in need. I think that's a great concept. It's not one that started with her. It's actually one that started with Jesus himself. He came and said, "I have come not to be served, but to serve, and to give my life as a ransom for many." It's the focus of all that he does in our lives to say, "I designed you for this unique relationship with me. I invite you into it." And so today, as we take a look at the text and see that this is what Jesus is all about, we find him heading back across the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum. Now he went to the Gentile side of the lake because there was one man that he decided he was going to go and help. Demon-possessed man. We read about that last week. We talked about that. And he was willing to go that distance for one person, just like he's willing to go the distance for each one of us. Maybe today you feel like you're out of reach from him. Maybe today you're struggling with all that is going on. Maybe somewhere along the line, you may have even felt like, I don't know if I can make it through what I'm going through. You've lost some of your hope. I want to encourage you that God's timing is amazing. Might not be the same as our timing, but his timing is significantly different than our own. When and how he decides to intervene is one of the great mysteries of our faith. And today's lesson is all about that. Here we find two people in this text, a wealthy person and a woman who has nothing, coming to Jesus out of desperation, hoping that he can do something to help their situation. But isn't that when we as humans oftentimes look? It's that time when we are most desperate, when we're at the end of our rope and there's really nowhere else for us to go. It's at that point that we're ready to listen and hear. So let's go to the text. Verses 21 through 24. When Jesus went in the boat back to the side of the lake, a large crowd had gathered around him. A leader of the synagogue, named Jairus, came there, saw Jesus, and fell at his feet. He begged Jesus, saying again and again, "My daughter is dying. Please come, put your hands on her, so she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed Jesus and pushed very close around him. We're introduced to Jairus. It says he was one of the rulers of the synagogue. The word archon in Greek means a spiritual authority who influences people. He was a Pharisee, and in his job as a Pharisee, he had to make sure that everything within the synagogue was taken care of. He had both the physical needs and the spiritual needs of the community to be concerned with. Jairus was in the synagogue the morning that the man with the withered hand came in and received healing by Jesus. He listened to the questions Jesus asked the Pharisees. He hears them. Is it okay to heal on the Sabbath? Should we take care of this man's needs or not? Jairus had exposure to Jesus, but we don't see that he actually stepped over and decided to follow him. He had to live within that tension, and I'm sure there were all kinds of questions going on in his mind about the possibility that Jesus might be the Messiah or he might be a fraud. But seeing Jesus do this amazing, miraculous work that he was doing was causing him to think very deeply about it. There was such a big group that was crowding in upon Jesus. And the reason Jairus at this point, as you read in the story, wanted to come is because his daughter was in a very severe situation. His daughter was very sick. She was dying. She was not getting any better. She was slipping away. He was going to do everything possible to get there, to go, to make sure that Jesus would listen to his plea, that he would convince Jesus to actually come to his home, lay hands on her, and heal her. He had come to the point, though, where he didn't care what people thought. He wasn't concerned about his position, his prestige, his power. One thought consumed his mind: my little girl, I want to do everything possible that she might be saved. All that matters was that. I don't know what he had to do to push through the crowd, but when a person's desperate enough, it seems like nothing can really stand in their way. He reaches Jesus, and what does he do? He flings himself at his feet, right? He just falls prostrate before Jesus. Do you realize what that signifies? When a person drops himself down on their knees before another person? Have you ever done that? Have you ever fell on your knees? It's putting yourself in a position where this person has authority over you. It is an act of worship, of submission. And the moment that Jairus did this, everyone around is watching. He lost his social status. He lost the respect in the eyes of those who were religiously watching Jesus to see if they could trip him up. He lost his power and influence that he'd spent years trying to earn. This was going to cost him greatly to come to Jesus and ask for this specific thing. And with tears in his eyes, he begs Jesus to come and lay his hands on his little daughter, believing in his heart of hearts that Jesus was going to heal her. Notice that he begged with all earnestness. In the perfect tense, in the Greek language, it implies that he implored him continually, over and over, repeating the phrase, "Come, Jesus, please come heal, come immediately, come now." Jairus' actions are an important milepost in the journey of his faith. This person is not making any promises, so catch that right. He's not making any, I'm following after you, I'm giving my life, I'm submitting to you. This is his first act of faith. It's out of desperation and hopes that Jesus is going to respond. It's wonderful that Jesus takes us wherever we're at in our faith, right? He comes and he says, "I'm willing to take you right where you are, and I will lead you to the next place you need to go." I was trained actually by the Red Cross up in Cloquet, Minnesota to become a lifeguard while I was in high school. I thought it would be a pretty cool job sitting out by the pool soaking up the sun. So in 9th grade, the one grade I was in Cloquet before we moved to North Branch, our swim coach said, "John, come. I will teach you the advanced life-saving techniques. You'll get your Red Cross certificate. It will be great." But he was a very serious kind of guy. And he reminded us that we have to be constantly alert, consistently vigilant, see people who might be struggling. And I remember this because he made us write it down on our sheet. He told us that most people drown with a lifeguard or someone who could save them nearby because of these 3 reasons. 1, they don't realize they're in trouble until it's far too late. Number 2, they start to panic. They lose control. 3, they can't get themselves out of the situation, but they don't call out for help because they think, "I still have a chance on my own." He said you have to watch out for them. That's why you're up there as a lifeguard, when they don't see what you do see. He said those who call out for help right away, guess what? They are the best chance of getting saved. They live to see another day. Most people come to Jesus during the worst of times. It's probably how you and I came to him. We were desperate for something. We came to him and said, "Lord, can you meet me at this point of need?" A lot of people have to reach rock bottom. Wherever that might be, we don't know. It's then that they're willing to look up. It's then they're ready to receive him and fully understand all he wants to give them. In the present situation across the world, it's really tough right now. We're in desperate times. People are looking for answers to this pandemic that has swept across our nation and the world. People are looking for some type of reason for why it's happening, but they're also saying, how can we calm our fears? Our security has been based upon the patterns that we had here, and now those patterns, those security places, those places of certainty are no longer certain. This is really, really a tough time. It's shaken the foundations, and some of them are crumbling. Like Jairus, desperation grows greater every day. And these are the situations that I think the church can have its greatest impact. Throughout history, that's what you see. C.S. Lewis said years ago, "Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It's a megaphone to rouse a deaf world." God did not create evil. He gave us the freedom to choose, and people made choices long ago. I talked about that last week, about the choice to have our own way, to not listen to God's way, caused the fall. Now all creation is in groaning. We have to live in the midst of that in our broken world. So where are you turning during this time of desperation? During this time of great difficulty? What's giving you real hope? Something amazing happened here in Jairus' heart. He is moved to a place of humility and dependence upon God. It's quite remarkable what is going on in him. And he's begging Jesus to do what? Well, after he said, please come heal, what did Jesus do? He went with him. Verse 24. A large crowd followed Jesus, pushed in close around him. We don't hear any big conversation happen. Jesus is just going. By the way, this crowd, it had to frustrate Jairus to no end. I got to tell you, that was my daughter, and I had to go try to get to where I needed to be at to get to her so that Jesus would get there. I would just be pushing people, get out of the way, move out of the way. And it had to be so that this crowd was just locked him in place. In fact, that's the idea behind this word that's with crowd. It's a chokehold. It's a stranglehold. I would be going nuts at this particular time. Come on, Jesus. Can you get going a little faster? Can we just run through this crowd? Can we do something? Verse 25 to 28. Something takes place to stop the whole thing. Shuts the whole thing down. We don't know how long, but enough for this unique circumstance to come out. Among the crowd was a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered very much from many doctors, had spent all the money that she had, but instead of improving, she was getting worse. She was getting worse. When the woman heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd, touched his coat. She thought, if I can just touch his clothes, I'm going to be healed. Out of the scene comes this woman. She's been suffering for a long period of time, 12 years. She has a bleeding problem, which, by the way, makes her unclean in that society. In the church of the day, the synagogue of the day, she would be isolated. No one to hold her, no one to walk alongside her. You had to keep your distance from her. Much more painful than the social distancing we're doing today. No one to just be with her in this. And the cultural assumption of that day was that she was going through this because there was either an immoral failure, some kind of sin in her life. So this suffering she was going through was because of sin, and you want to stay away from her because maybe you'll become tainted by whatever she was tainted by. Very, very painful. But she had spent everything she had trying to find a cure, went to all kinds of doctors. She was suffering mentally, emotionally, obviously spiritually. The accusations, these were taking a toll on her. Nothing had worked. She had run the gamut. She had nowhere else to go. So she turned to Jesus. She had heard about him. People had told her. Of course, it was spreading everywhere. Gossip was everywhere. This would have been the YouTube channel where everyone goes, and many places on it. It would have been spread through Instagram of the day. It would have been spread through, every medium possible in their particular day. We know they didn't have electronics, but you know what I'm saying. The word of mouth, boom, it's out there. Can you imagine, though, her feeling as she's asking all these questions, making her way to Jesus, trying to find, when she got to Jesus finally, and all of a sudden she looks how she had snuck through the crowd, and there was a religious leader standing next to Jesus, trying to get him to move through the crowd. I wonder if that caused her to say, boy, I wish I could just turn away, because that's the very person who would judge me the worst and say, unclean, unworthy, go away. But she had in her mind, if I could just touch his garment, if I could just reach out and just maybe brush past him, I'll be made well. No big fanfare, no one really knowing what's going on. I'm just going to go do that. Verse 29, instantly her bleeding stopped. She felt in her body that she was healed from her disease. Just as she touched Jesus' cloak, her greatest hopes had come true. Wonderful day. She could actually feel the stopping of the blood in her body. Her pain was gone. The eternal elation must have been great. I'm sure she was like, oh, I want to dance. I want to jump up, tell everyone what's happened. But she knew she couldn't do that. She thought, I'm just going to sneak away out of here that no one would know, because I'm done with the ridicule. I'm done with the judgmentalism. I'm done with all that in my life. I just want to go and at least be free from the pain that I was suffering through. But it didn't happen that quickly, did it? Just as she was trying to slip away, the Lord suddenly turned and said something powerful to her. Verse 30-32. At once Jesus felt power go out of him, so he turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? His followers asked him, look, there's people all around you pushing against you, and you asked, who touched you? But Jesus continued looking around to see who had touched him. Imagine the bewildered looks. He's just trying to catch the eye of the person. He knows who he's looking for. He could tell as there would be someone in the crowd that he would recognize. Not someone who came that was looking for something from him to give to him for their own self-fulfillment or grandiose ideology, but someone who came desperate. Someone who came who needed what he most wanted to offer. And when Jesus made eye contact with this woman, she was gripped with fear. In fact, everything melted inside of her. She was stuck in this situation, not even sure what she was going to do. Verse 33, the woman, knowing that she was healed, came and fell at Jesus' feet. Shaking with fear, she told him the whole truth. She's exposed for all to see. Why hold anything back? It doesn't matter. I've got this healing. Something's changed in me. I'm just going to pour it all out. So she did. She let them know. She fell down before the Lord, and I bet she wondered what kind of ridicule and bombardment that maybe was going to happen. And just take a moment to step back. What do you think is going on in Jairus' mind, right? He was looking at her probably with a cold stare. What are you doing? Don't you realize I have a dying daughter at home? Jesus has got to get to my needs before he gets to yours. Just, Jesus, come on. Let's move on. You don't need to stop and talk. I don't know. But in that moment, when she starts to share her story of what life was like before Jesus, I can imagine her tear-filled pain. Listen, I had this bleeding. I don't know how it started. It hasn't stopped. I went and paid for all the medical advice, and now I'm penniless. I've been ostracized. I've been an outcast. I have not been accepted. But when I touched you, Jesus, I was made well. I don't understand it. Verse 34, Jesus said to her, dear woman, you are made well because you believed. Go in peace. Be healed of your disease. Which signified the healing that you just had, you're going to be healed. It's going to continue on. Present active indicative. It's going to continue on. The work that's been done will continue to take precedence in your life. This is some of the best news she ever had. Her fears were relieved. And you notice what he called her? He said, dear woman. It actually comes out as daughter. In many translations, daughter. When's the last time she was called that? When's the last time that she was called a name that would have been given her that showed that she was precious, that signified a father-child-like relationship, one where she was nurtured, cared for? Sometimes Jesus calls us to come and to learn from him, to grow together with him, to go deeper with him. And other times you see, like he did with this woman, he says to her, go in peace. There are those occasions where Jesus will do both of those at different times. Teach one of us. Sometimes he's inviting you, come. You need to come to me, all you are weary, heavy laden. I'm going to give you rest. There's other times he says, go, share the story. You now have my peace. I need you to let people know there is a God who infinitively loves them. There's a rhythm to God's pattern that you see within this that has come out in Psalm 50. Look at verse 15. Here it is. 3 things. Call to me in times of trouble. I will save you, and you will honor me. Here it is. In our desperation, call out to God. 2, wait upon him to save you, to redeem you, to rescue you. And 3, share the story of what he has done to bring him honor and glory for who he is. Jesus did this in my life. He amazingly saved me from myself. He saved me from the pain and the hurt of the past. He saved me from betrayal. He saved me from the sense of falling down into areas of my life where I would have been completely devastated. He came in and set me on solid ground and has made my life infinitely different, with all the fruits of the Spirit and the joy and the hope that goes along with that. And into this beautiful scene, you just feel this wonderful moment. And if you're living through the eyes of that woman, you think, thank you, Jesus. But now comes a messenger who brings a different tone. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of the synagogue leader. They said, your daughter is dead. There's no need to bother the teacher anymore. A joyful moment for one, a horrific moment for another. In Jairus' mind, he may have been looking at this woman and said, why did you hold this up? I know you had needs, but now my daughter is dead. And all my hope was based upon that. But before he could go down that pathway of resentment and despair, Jesus intervenes. Jesus paid no attention to what they said, verse 36. He told the synagogue leader, don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. He's asking Jairus to have faith in him once again, right? You came to me in faith. Hold on to that mustard seed faith that you think maybe I could trust Jesus. Maybe he could intervene. Hold on to that. You've heard your daughter's dead, but there's something big coming. Will you believe in me? Will you trust me? Will you continue to take me with you? Or will you leave me here standing in the crowd? He wants him to believe in him. Luke further extends this by encouraging him by saying that, guess what? Your daughter will be made well. What an amazing test of one's faith. Wow. So what does Jairus do? He does choose to believe in him. And whenever you see extreme challenges where a person is invited into believe outside of the circumstances that seem just overwhelmingly difficult and maybe impossible, you can be sure that this is the kind of faith that Jesus most wants and most celebrates and will most build on. Jesus will consistently ask us to trust even when we don't understand the outcome. In this particular case, Jesus told this man his daughter was going to be made well even after she was pronounced dead. Was Jairus going to believe him or not? I was serving a few years ago in Maple Grove Covenant Church, and I had a great friend there. We did Sunday school together, we played guitar together, we did worship together. Alan Burton was a wonderful gift to me in my life. He was also a dedicated husband and father. He was a brilliant professor at the University of Minnesota in kinesiology, well-loved, well-liked, just a person who gave himself consistently. A couple years after I left at Maple Grove, he developed cancer. And he would come down to Rochester at times. He continually kept me updated on the progress. Sometimes it was up and we praised God that there was answer to prayer for what looked like some healing. Other times it was down and we prayed that God would intervene. This constant back and forth. It was hard. But through all of that, there was a trust that kind of pervaded through. I met his wife, met with his wife, actually Joanne. She met with her often as we were praying together, but she was an amazing follower of Jesus, and I had a conversation with her often through this, and one day she told me, John, I had a vision. God just showed me that Alan is going to be healed and there's going to be such celebration. I'm just so excited. And I said, I treasure that with you. I will wait upon the answer to see what God does. Not too long after that, Alan passed away. And that was a really tough time. I went through some difficult grief and questioning during that, which often has happened when people have died in my life that I prayed passionately for. God's been faithful to journey with me through that. And so a short time after that, I said, I just got to find out where she's at with this. And so I called her up and said, hey, can I ask you some questions about that vision you had and about Alan being healed and what all that was about? And she said, yeah. And so she sent me actually a note, a little bit longer letter on this. And in it, she said this: I initially believed that God had given me a vision of Alan's healing in this life. What I didn't understand was that God was going to provide the ultimate healing. There is no greater or beautiful place than to be at the side of Jesus. whether it is in this life or in the next. Being close to Jesus is what real life is all about. Being close to Jesus. Being close to Jesus. This is what real life is all about. Were there many days of disappointment, anger? Absolutely. Struggles? Certainly. She had believed, she trusted, she had faith in God, but she knew that God was greater than Alan being here, and her desire for him grew through this. I like what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said when they were about to be thrown into the fiery furnace for their trust in God. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. I love that. Yeah. Listen, Mr. Ruler, sir, listen, all you people hanging around here, our God is able to save us, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Daniel 3, 17, 18. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. I love that. But even if he doesn't, I mean, God's going to save us, but if he doesn't, I mean, do you hear the amazing faith within that? They recognize that we know God can do it, and we're dependent upon him to do it. But if he decides, today's not your day, it's time for you to come home, I got a different plan for you, that's okay too. We're not going to give in to the pressure, though, around us. This is the kind of trust that God looks for, beyond the present circumstances, to something far greater. Now, Jesus does something we find in various occasions. He stops the crowd. He doesn't want them coming to Jairus' home. He says, you guys are done, you stay here. How he did it, I don't know, but he was able to stop them from coming. 37, verse 37, 40. Jesus let only Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, go with him. And when they came to the house of the synagogue leader, Jesus found many people there, making lots of noise and crying loudly. Jesus entered the house and said to them, why are you crying and making so much noise? The child's not dead, only asleep. But they laughed at him. So after throwing them out of the house, Jesus took the child's father and mother and his 3 followers into the room where the child was. It took Jesus so long to come that people had already started to mourn the loss. Within the Jewish tradition, if a person dies, they need to be buried within 24 hours. So you start the mourning process right away. These professional mourners, which they most likely were because they had those in that culture, would grieve loudly in the home, outside the home, so that everyone could hear, so they could join in the grief. They were much more expressive about their grief. We try to hide it away, and we go off and do that instead of saying, this hurts me, this pains me in a way that I don't even know how to hold it back. And so they allow themselves to physically wail and let people know. And so for Jesus, what did they do? They laughed at him. And they laughed at him and ridiculed, partly because they said, you are so insensitive to the situation, Jesus. How could you come in and do this to the family? You insensitive, callous man. But here's what Jesus did. Verse 41. Taking hold of the girl's hand, he said to her, Talitha Kumai, which means, young girl, I tell you to stand up. Common language for that day was Aramaic. The Hebrew language was a bit forgotten in that day and age. It was only used by the religious leaders and the scholars. And so everyone around there was speaking it, and it literally means, little lamb, get up. Verse 42, at once the girl stood up and began walking. She was 12 years old. Everyone was completely amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell people about this. Then he told them to give the girl something to eat. Everyone was amazed. Everyone's amazed? Isn't that quite an understatement? Are you kidding? A person was just raised from the dead by God, by Jesus, who now some have realized he is the Son of God. He is the one we've been waiting for. He is the Messiah. He is so connected in. He was able to take the natural world, his disciples said, the supernatural world. Now he's able to beat back death itself. This is extraordinary. This is news we can't help but hold to ourselves. No, we want to tell everyone about this. I find it interesting that after the girl gets up, he says, give her something to eat. I wonder if Jesus is trying to make a distinction between what his responsibilities are and what ours are. I don't know. But it's interesting that this whole situation doesn't get held back when he says, now don't tell anybody about this. Instead, Matthew points out that it became known throughout the district. Of course it's going to be. Jesus just raised the dead. Jairus, he had come to a point of desperation where his social status didn't matter anymore. Jesus matters because he raised my girl from the dead. That was what mattered to me, and now I see there's something even more important. I watched Jesus heal this woman. He stopped out of his compassion to help another out because he knew something I didn't know. It seems like we have to come to a point where our need for Jesus will outweigh our cost of following him. In our desperation, are you willing to let that step of faith in you help you to grow closer to him? I don't care what I have to go through. I want to know this Jesus who does these things. I want to have my security based upon him, not upon the situations in society or where I find myself. I want to be secure, put on a rock in a place where storms can be all around me and I feel safe. When you come to him brokenhearted and out of a genuine need, he'll meet you. When you're desperate for him, he'll never reject you. He'll rescue you. He'll save you. Red Cross, behind me, I talked about I trained to become a lifeguard. And I remember when our teacher came and basically gave us our wonderful Red Cross cards for advanced life-saving certification. And I loved it. I said, all right, give me my card. Here we go. Woo, I'm going to be a lifeguard. But before he handed each one of these to us, he asked 3 questions. And the questions were on there, and when he asked us, and he said, okay, will you be alert? Will you be ready? And will you respond? And he just held it. You can't have this until I know for certain that's what you're going to do. Are you going to be alert, ready, and responsive when the time comes? And he was serious. Like I said, he was a very serious. He took the role serious. We can have this wonderful, joyful relationship with Jesus, but one thing we take serious is in this world, people need him. And they need you to be Jesus' hands and feet, message bearers, and all around us, people are wondering, is there a place to have hope? We have hope, people. Share that with them. I look forward to talking to you more about that as we go through this in the weeks ahead. God bless you today. Amen.